Everything should be pseudo decent. Says it's live. That's a good sign. But like the thing is, you got to wait a bit because it doesn't give you a preview window. Like other places give you a preview window, but this one, nope. All right, cool. So we just did the audio test. Um, we should be good. All right, so I'm gonna tweet this out, and then we can get started relatively immediately. But for those of you who want more political content, there's going to be a lot of it. I'm going to be focusing a lot more on theory soon. But for for the sort of interceding months between the libertarian sort of capitulation and sellout, and also the inauguration, I feel like there's still some things that need to be said. And from what I understand, my guest today has a lot to say on this subject. So, why don't you briefly introduce yourself, Garrett, and say sort of your origin story, your Batman origin story, and give us the general vibe, how you got into activism, what life was like in your college experience, things like that.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me.
No
Like I
problem.
said, my
Thank
name's
you.
Garrett Smith. Live in Central Texas. Love it down here. And yeah, so I guess my origin story, my Batman story would be I was raised in the Texas Panhandle, and so if from a political standpoint, if you're looking at the red state, red map of Texas, it's the maroon dot. I mean, it's about as red as it gets. And I was raised that way too. I was, in a pretty conservative area, conservative household. Never even heard the term libertarian. Um, so I was in high school during the invasion of Iraq, and it was basically the mentality of you're with Bush or you're with the terrorists kind of a thing. And so I was kind of raised with that. It's all black and white, one way or the other mindset. And when I say raised with, I'm not saying my parents made me believe everything, but just the environment we were all in, it was just kind of naive. And in college, I kind of carried that with me, and I kind of just lived the conservative way. I kickstarted the college Republicans where I was, and I kind of want to vomit when I make this analogy, but in my student leadership, I was kind of the Donald Trump of my little college campus because I would say things that people, oh, that's too mean, that's kind of controversial, and at the same time, I did a lot of things where it's like, well, someone needs to say this, someone needs to get it done, and I'm not saying that Trump, was getting stuff done the way he should, but it's the best analogy I can make for how people viewed me. And so throughout college, it was kind of like I would look at some of the administrative decisions that were made, vetoing my ideas as a student leader and some things like that, and I would think, what's the deal? This is some backwards way of thinking. And I thought that was an isolated thing. I thought it was my college, they don't know how to think or whatever. Then I went off into the real world and realized, no, that's just anywhere you have a ladder that people climb, the view is going to get a little disconnected from what the boots on the ground are seeing. And I was still a Republican at the time. I went and worked a couple of campaigns, got kind of disillusioned with what happened behind closed doors, and felt kind of politically homeless there for a little bit. And so I would come around it was kind of like a slow fade, When in 2012, I was at the Republican convention in Fort Worth when I saw what they did to the Ron Paul supporters and had security give them one entrance and then cleared them out that entrance and made sure they didn't vote in the straw polls or anything like that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, we're supposed to be the good guys. Why are we doing this? And that week alone just added to the disillusion. I worked for a candidate who started off as the Liberty option in a primary field of 12 candidates, and we made the runoff with a very establishment Republican. We were the Liberty option, and then behind closed doors, he became just like the rest of them. And it's before the announcement of the results was even done, I had my resignation letter typed. I was like, I'm done with this. So it was one of those things where I really started to question, okay, well, how people who disagree with me can't all be stupid. There's got to be something I'm missing. So I kind of took a broader step back and realized, okay, well, what was I raised to believe? What was I always told? Well, a gay marriage, should be legal, should it not? And I'm thinking, well, what if straight marriage was illegal? I wouldn't want the government telling me who I can marry, and that kind of thought process started to go. I started to look at the drug war and thinking, well, it's not conservative to spend this much money on something that clearly doesn't work and has actually caused a bigger problem than it started. So just one thing after another kind of led me down the rabbit hole until I realized, I think I'm a libertarian. And my last shot that I was giving the Republicans was 2016 when Rand Paul was in the primary. And when he dropped out after Iowa, I'm like, I ain't voting for anybody who's left on that stage. And they had kind of pushed Gary Johnson out, and I had regretted not voting for Johnson in 2012. I was still under the impression, it's like, well, I don't like Mitt Romney, but I'm scared of Obama. I was kind of still in that mind frame. And I thought, well, I have voters regret. I should have voted for Johnson in 2012. I'll vote for him in 2016. And after that, I thought, you know what? I don't see the Republican Party getting more libertarian. I see it all going the other way. And so I kind of never looked back and officially joined the Libertarian Party 2016-ish. I don't remember when I officially got my card, but that was when I became a libertarian, big L or whatever they say. So after that, it was a matter of I lived in Houston, didn't really have a way to get involved. I went to a couple of meetings, but in Houston, you can drive 3 hours and you're still in Houston. So it was hard to get where I needed to go. When I moved back to Central Texas, my town was small enough that one of the first ways I could get involved was the Libertarian Party. And our party was inactive because anyone who's familiar with Bell County, Fort Hood or Fort Cavazos, whichever one people want to call it, was here. And so at one point, all the county officers for our Libertarian Party were active duty military, and they all got deployed. So overnight, there was no party. And so worked with a guy named Daniel Lee to get it kind of reestablished, and he ended up moving. And so we were still working on the affiliation process. So I had no desire to be chair. I basically told the party, said, I'll do it if no one else does it. Well, lo and behold, no one else did it. So I was kind of like, well, here we go. And it was a tall task. We got affiliated. I went to the state convention and really worked to build. The problem is, as one of our members said, herding libertarians is like herding cats when you're trying to get something started. And so even though there was always an opportunity for our county, having the military base there, having Killeen, Texas, which voted to decriminalize marijuana, and then the state and the county got involved and tried to fight it. And it's one of those, each town kind of had its own libertarian focus. And it was a struggle. It was an uphill battle. It was like nailing Jello to a tree just to get things off the ground. But we built a few small numbers. We started to get a couple social events together. And then fast forward to this past year, we actually ran somebody for House of Representatives against our 20-plus year incumbent, John Carter. He's kind of a senile old guy. And we had a really good young candidate. Unfortunately, our state Republicans sued and got him knocked off the ballot.
How?
Most libertarians in Texas, well, in Texas, they do this lovely thing where the past 3 election cycles, they've sued to get third parties off the ballot. And the way they do this is the libertarians have protested the filing fee and said, we're not going to pay it. And the courts have always ruled in the Libertarian Party's favor, saying, well, you're levying an uneven playing field. These fees are not applying to you, so they should apply to them. And I guess third time was a charm for them. Ken Paxton, Dan Patrick, all those corrupt guys in Austin, they finally got a court case to go their way. And so really it's one of those, the last two, it's like they knew they weren't going to win the court case, but they knew that we had to lawyer up, and so they could drain our funds on legal fees. And so most of the people on the ballot got knocked off because they didn't have the filing fee paid. And our local candidate was one of them. However, because he got involved and I needed to take a step back just time-wise, because I don't like to put, a toe in the fire. If I'm gonna dive into something, I want to dive in. And so he's taken over for me as of last month, and he's got my full support. I stepped back so he could do that, and now I can just be a member. But I still plan on going to state conventions. I went to the last one. And so, yeah, it's one of those, I didn't really want to speak out, and I know this is part of the description of the episode. I didn't really want to speak out on some of the stuff that was going on in the party because it was, as a county chair, I didn't always know when I should. And, I didn't want to turn people away from the party because I made a conscious effort when I got started to not get involved in the whole this caucus, that caucus, the non-Mises, pro-Mises, because my first convention, I was still brand new. And I sat with some people who were not Mises Caucus, and one of them was actually very combative with them back and forth. But me being naive, I never saw it. He was a great guy. I got along great with everyone sitting around me. During lunch, I got invited to the patio to sit with some guys. They're really cool to talk to. They were in the Mises Caucus. And so throughout the weekend, I'm kind of like, what's the big deal? Everyone here's kind of got the same goal. Everything seems to be like, we should be all on the same side here. It really just boiled down to who they nominated to serve on the state committee were from both ends. And the more I got to know some of those people, the more I'm like, you do realize y'all agree on just like 90% of what you say. And so in Texas, it's not as heated or bad. Like there's that difference. But in the two conventions I've been to, it has not been combative at all, at least not on the floor or in the meetings. It's just been kind of like a little awkward between some people. It's not been like what we see on the national stage. So for that reason, I wasn't really privy to how just the magnitude of the quote unquote civil war that was going on in the Libertarian Party was until I really started watching the actions of the chairwoman. And I was unable to go to national convention this past year, but part of me really wished I could have, because it was just, I saw what was going on. And even though me being a vote there would not have changed any outcomes, I just wished I could have been there to cast the vote the way I felt. So I'm sure, as a lot of people saw the other day, and we'll get some of this, I'm sure, in a minute, being a musician and being an author and being that kind of stuff, it's like I always have projects I'm promoting, but it's hard to get your algorithms out there. It's very competitive, and you can pour your heart and soul into a project. 3 people see your tweet, but you complain about your favorite sports team and 80 people see it. You just never know. And I finally aired my opinion on what's been going on with Libertarian Party leadership a couple weeks ago. And my analytics, when I went into the premium tab, checked my analytics, and what used to look like a huge spike in analytics for like a big tweet was suddenly way down here. And I mean, it was like several 100% bigger than any tweet I'd ever put. And it was just overnight, it just blew up. I checked my phone in the morning because I just didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to read people arguing. I looked in the morning and I'm like, well, this is something. And a few days later, I kind of added a thought, and it wasn't real fiery or anything, but it kind of took off the way that one did. And I'm like, well, I guess if you really want your analytics to blow up on social media, say something popular to some, unpopular to others, dealing with libertarians, and you'll get there.
Yeah, well, and so
that was a really long answer to a short question.
Well, this channel is actually kind of known for that, so that's fine. So, and that's the thing. So, the tweet that I interacted with you based on, I was, like, scrolling, and this was in my my home feed, not my, following or anything, because we weren't mutuals at that point. But you said, okay, now that I'm not chairman, I can be more direct. Let's start with that. Chairman. You were chairman of the Libertarian Party of Bell County, if I understand correctly.
Yes, correct.
And how did you get that gig, and what were your responsibilities?
Getting the gig was more of kind of like I mentioned, the whole, if no one else is going to do it, someone needs to. And when I moved here, I hoped there was already an active group. I'm like, cool, I can meet some friends in the community, get involved. And then when I realized it was inactive, I'm like, I'm the one to do it. I should have mentioned this earlier. After my kind of squabbles with being a college student and questioning, administrative thought process, I actually went on and had a 10-year career in higher ed. I went and actually led student organizations, student government, and all that, so I could teach people, okay, I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to tell you how to think. You need to think for yourself and try to build leadership based on that instead of some of the things I'd seen. And my philosophy was, okay, the things that went well, emulate those. The way people hosed you over and were corrupt, do the opposite. And went on to, not to really toot my own horn here, but the Student Government Association at Blaine College, we went on and won 3 state awards. I've got 2 plaques on my wall for Advisor of the Year, just following the examples of what to do and what not to do. And so that said, I did a lot of event planning, a lot of organization, constantly recruiting for organizations. And by the time I moved here, I was burned out. The last thing I wanted to do was do more events and recruit more people to something. But like I said, there needed to be a party, and I really wanted to see it happen. So I got involved, and the county convention was essentially 3 people at a dinner. So as long as 2 people at the table voted for you, you were in. It was as kind of pathetic as that. But yeah, that's kind of how I got the gig. And as far as mentioning that I kind of had to hold my tongue for a while. Technically, I didn't have to. There was nobody saying don't speak about the chairman or anything like that. My big thing was I could say stuff probably personally, but I didn't want to do anything from the county page or in a way that, let's say there was someone from the Mises caucus that just moved to Bell County. I don't want them to like think they're not welcome to come join us. I didn't want someone who's anti-Mises to be like, well, you better be this, that, and the other and not come join. Because like I said, in Texas, that squabble's not really that big. It's more of like Texas just needs to grow its base. And Bell County is one of those where we had so many opportunities to grow that I didn't want someone else's squabble to come in the way of what we might be able to do. And so that's kind of why I waited until after I had resigned to really air that opinion out. Plus, Angela doesn't know me. She might after that tweet. I don't know. But the most contact I've ever had with Angela was when we coincidentally got stuck in an elevator from the first floor to the second floor at state convention. And that was it. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and what were your responsibilities as chair?
It's interesting. Nobody really handed me any responsibility. It was kind of the county bylaws weren't updated. Everything was kind of basic. I mean, I could have just sat there and done nothing really. But what I wanted to do was get the bylaws revamped so that people could be held to some responsibility. So we did that. Basically the responsibilities I gave myself were use social events to recruit, get more publicity out there because our county is a prime spot for some of the libertarian issues we focus on, and just grow from there. After those two things, really my priority was, okay, regardless of what's happening in this county, I need to go to the conventions and be involved with the state party. And so those were really the main three things for me. And even though none of the conventions have happened, county-wise, the growth was extremely slow. And that was very frustrating for me because I did everything I could, and it got to the point where you just had to rely on people to show up, and sometimes people just don't do that. But at the end of the day, I look back on it, and I'm like, well, I'm not disappointed because I did what I could. This happens to a lot of counties with people who are even more active than I am. And we finally got in the 4th of July parade this year. And so the most publicity our parties had was this July when Belton has, I think, the second or third largest, if not the largest. It's in like top 3 4th of July festivities in the state of Texas. So I think I heard there was like 60,000 people lined up for this parade, and they got to see our libertarian signage. And we had, out of the thousands and thousands of people we passed, we had one guy kind of heckle us playfully. And we had a lot of thumbs up and claps and people yelling like, I didn't know you were here. And like, oh, I want to vote for you. Like, it was shocking to me how much support that actually got. And so for Caleb Farrell, the name of the guy who's taking over, I think even though it didn't blow up and boom the way I wanted, it is, I think we've set it to where he can take it and run with it.
Yeah, and like just looking at the page here for the Libertarian Party of Bell County, it seems like because of the kinds of issues that you wanted to face, one of the primary ways that you faced that issue was like the costs of war, because like you're in a place with like significant military presence, to say the least, and a lot of these people have seen horrors and also been subject to horrors. And those didn't even need to happen because anyone who knows anything knows that we've been lied into every major war the U.S. has ever been involved in, at least somewhat. Like, and so, like, briefly touch on that. Briefly touch on, just to get some bona fides out of the way, like military-industrial complex, war on drugs, sort of feelings on things like that, general libertarian issues.
You could almost describe the war on drugs and the military-industrial complex the same way without saying which one you're talking about. If you just say we've been blowing way too much money on wars that don't work, that's the short version of both those. But for me, like I said, in 2004, I was in high school, and I'm like, let's go kick their, like let's go over there and win this thing in a week. They live in caves. How hard can this be? And then it got drawn out, and then it became obvious. It's like, okay, we got nuked. Like, there's there's a whole rabbit hole I won't even go down, but I told somebody one time, it's like Bush may have gotten duped. Like, I don't think that he was the mastermind behind making this whole like global thing happen. You had Dick Cheney in his ear the whole time. I think there were a lot of players behind the scene that may have even duped him into duping us, kind of a thing. And it's one of those things where the patterns continue. When you notice a pattern of things over and over again, it's like, well, there you go. And now look, we're in, Obama's big campaign was, hope and change. We're going to get out of the wars and rainbows and unicorns, all this kind of stuff. And instead, it's like not only were we still in Iraq and Afghanistan, but like we had Libya and Syria and Yemen. And it's just one of those things where it's like you mentioned the conflict in Yemen right now to anybody, even people who watch the news, and they're like, what are you talking about? They have no idea that we're bombing the crap out of Yemen so that the Saudis can make some more money. I'm like, people, you do realize the Saudis are the ones funding Al Qaeda, right? Like, why are we? They're buying all our soccer leagues and we're bombing Yemen for them. I don't get it. And Biden kept it going. Trump said it was going to end and he kept it going. It's just one of those. I'm kind of tired of hearing every promise on a campaign in the book that we're going to end all these wars. And it's like, if anything, they're going to start more of them. And I know some libertarians think Trump is the most libertarian president in history and that he's going to, because he, quote, didn't start new wars. I'm like, well, as far as I'm concerned, if you're the president and you wake up in the morning and you have the power to get us out, do it. Like, if you wake up the next morning and you still haven't done it, that's as bad as starting a new war to me. Like, you've promised, you put Jeb Bush on blast in the debates saying that his brother started ISIS, and then you got out there and just created more of it. That's my big problem with military-industrial complex, is that it's all for the dollar. I still like people who sign up for the military and they go in a fight. Like, there are a lot of people that do that so they can actually defend our freedom. That's what they want to do. And then the military sends them into these places that, like, they didn't expect to go to Yemen. They didn't expect to go to Syria. It's like, when I say these things, I don't want somebody to listen and be like, he's disrespecting the troops in the military. No, it's not the troops or the military, so to speak. It's military-industrial complex, the buddy system. A friend of mine who was in the Air Force, he said, he's a libertarian and he's in the Air Force. And he told me, he said, what people need to realize is it's not even just the wars. It's contracts for parts for planes. Like, you could get this part reliable and affordable for this amount, but because this general is friends with this contractor who's buddies with this producer, we have to make more expensive bolts. And it's the amount of waste. And I mean, when you have Bernie Sanders agreeing with Elon Musk that the Pentagon's audit failures are a very big problem, it's like, okay, those two are very different areas of politics right now. And they're saying the same thing, like, the Pentagon has got to get its crap together. And as far as the drug war you mentioned, that one to me should be a no-brainer. I don't want to oversimplify, but there's an article that I believe it was the Cato Institute that put out several years ago that highlighted how much we spent and what we spent it on, even combating opium in Afghanistan. And I'm like, did we not have bigger fish to fry if we were going to be over there? It was talking about, you could curb way more illegal immigration by legalizing marijuana than you will by building a wall. If you cripple cartels with legalization, you solve way more problems than saying, oh, we're just going to add more border patrol agents. Like, I'm one of those libertarians. Like, yeah, I want to protect the border. I think we need to revamp the system to where it's easier to immigrate here, obviously, because if it was a one-stop shop, fill out this form, congratulations, you're in, welcome to America, and all these people that need asylum, all these people that need to come in came in, it'd be easier to vet the ones trying to sneak in and actually do harm. Like, if the only people actually sneaking across were the ones that didn't want to do the paperwork anymore, and it's far less of them, well, then you actually know who the problem is when they're coming across. So Republicans don't want to admit that drug legalization is the way to go. Democrats don't want to solve the problem, so to speak, because they want to let everybody in. It's like neither main party has a good solution or really wants to fix it. And when you lay it all out and say, hey, it's not a conservative value to spend this much money on something that doesn't work, that ruffles feathers and they cover the ears. So for me, it's an aggravating topic because it just seems like such a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it's like, there are a whole lot of Republicans feigning moral consternation over various things that Biden did recently. Like, for instance, he pardoned Hunter Biden. Yeah, that's bad.
Oh.
I mean, like, but it's bad because he didn't pardon so many other people, some of whom he's
Right.
responsible for locking up. But meanwhile, Trump wants very similar things to happen to the people who are involved in drugs. Only he also wants to add executions to the list. And
Yeah.
like he's hiring people like Vivek Ramaswamy, who literally says he wants like warfare with Mexico. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
like
Dan Crenshaw wants to bomb them.
yeah. And so like he's hiring those people. They feign moral consternation about the war in the Israeli like genocide, which is a bad thing, absolutely. But then Trump is surrounding himself with Zionists, was heavily paid by Miriam Adelson, also the APAC like donations of over $1 million. They have feigned moral consternation over Trump, over Biden, like fist bumping Mohammed Bonesaw Salman, and then when Trump hosts golf tournaments with the same guy's money, um, while promising good arms relations, it's suddenly okay. They'll feign moral consternation over alleged grooming, and then they'll support a friend of Epstein. It's like
Yeah.
this all the time, and like it's so exhausting for these people to especially since so many of them are now from the libertarian circle, to just like give up on the actual consistency and libertarian arguments that gave them any high ground at all over Biden, and just say this guy
Yeah.
who's basically just as bad or worse in all the ways that we say somebody's bad. Yeah, put him in. He'll be great for
Yeah.
our liberty. Um, and like so with that in mind, um, there was some things you said you didn't say that you wanted to say, um, and you sort of held your tongue while you were the chairman. Um, so let's start with some sort of administrative stuff, like the kind of stuff that you would have felt would have interfered with your ability to properly convey the message in a way that would still allow you to effectively partake in the structuring of the system.
Yeah. So, and just to clarify, so are you asking kind of like why I like didn't think I could say some of it, or
Effectively.
effective? Okay. So for anyone that doesn't follow, which I imagine a lot of people that hear this already do, but Angela McCardle is very combative. I'm not saying I'm a prude on bad language, but when you call someone a fat C word in front of like a large audience, it's like, dude, you gotta be a chairwoman. Like, there's a place for everything, and this isn't it. Because to me, I didn't want to actually broadcast her existence really to prospective members of our local party. If people were like leaving the Republican Party or weren't sure what libertarianism was about, I didn't want their first exposure to be, hey, we're in the middle of a big fight right now with our own chairwoman in this caucus. And if you explain the dysfunction, if I were new to the party, I'd hear that and be like, I don't know if this is as golden as it sounded. Like, I wanted it to be like, okay, baby steps. Let's get you involved locally. And then on the other side of that, as far as administrative things that could have inhibited me from doing my job, is Angela is very combative and has a I win, you lose kind of attitude. It's never we win, the party wins. It's always I won, I got my way, F you if you don't believe me kind of a thing. And, just the other night there was a Twitter space or whatever they call it where the title was, "Did I sell out my principles by supporting Trump?" And my thought was, well, if you have to ask, there's your answer. But Chase Oliver got on there and, credit to him. He did a good job, I thought, of addressing it. Like, he could have gone off on him, really, and cussed everybody out. But Chase actually did. Like, most people that wrote him off as a, quote, weak candidate really didn't research him much. And people say, well, I didn't see him on these podcasts. I didn't see him on that. I'm like, that's because most libertarians have been blacklisted from big media coverage since Gary Johnson ran away with 3 million votes. Like, Gary Johnson then was like on Colbert and all these other groups. They wouldn't even let Joe Jorgensen anywhere near that afterwards. And a lot of people blamed her for that. And I'm not saying she ran a good campaign. The fact that they kind of blackballed Spike Cohen from having any say in how they ran it was their biggest mistake. But for Chase, like Chase did a great job in the Georgia Senate race, and people seem to have forgotten that he's the one that sent that thing into a runoff with Walker and Warnock. And so he gets the nomination, and suddenly it's like, oh, but he's gay, so he's a leftist. Oh, he wore a mask at Thanksgiving one time, he's a leftist. And I'm like, I like what Chase said in the chat. He said that tweet that was screenshot about Thanksgiving was a response to a Democrat that accused him of putting his family in danger for not locking up at COVID. It's like, if anything, he was going anti-Democrat with that reply. And Angela's whole thing after that was just this unhinged rant about like, yeah, well, screw you, I won, I got my way. And I finally, like, I didn't hold my tongue at the end of that. I said, you know, Dave Smith, I agree with Dave on a lot of things. You know, there's a lot of things I disagree with him on. And, you know, he doesn't know who I am from Adam, so I don't really care. But at the same time, like, I disagreed with what Dave said, but the way he delivered it was like, okay, A, I get it. I don't agree with you, but I do get what you're saying. B, he was at least respectful about it. Like, he directly addressed Chase Oliver and said, you know, like, with all due respect, Dave and Chase could have talked after that episode and it was probably civil. Whereas Angela went off, and that's why I commented, I said, you know, at least Dave was being respectful. Angela, you need to act like a professional. Mm-hmm. And it's just, she gives us a bad look right now. And that's, you know, membership's down. The numbers of donations speak for themselves. It's hard for me. Like, when I was looking at Bell County, I'm like, how do I build this when we have a national chairwoman who's driving down our membership this rapidly and selling us out to Trump? And it was a hard thing to combat. And so this was kind of like I wouldn't say wave the white flag year as far as being a libertarian, but unfortunately our biggest, our biggest entity in this country to promote liberty, the people running it waved the white flag. And we had basically, like, you could vote Chase Oliver as a protest vote, but that was about all the good it was going to do. And I mean, I voted for him because I didn't want to go along with the McCardle thing. B, the way Trump has handled Yemen alone, among other things, is just something, you know, earlier we're talking off air. Like, I am a Christian believer. I'm not one of these people that's going to, like, you know, post the meme of Jesus holding hands with Trump saying they persecuted me too, you know, like after he got the felony thing. Like, it's like, come on, that's not even like remotely what the Jesus would have wanted you to do. And my thing is like, okay, Jesus would be looking at, okay, this man bombed so many Christians and women and children and other people in Yemen. Are you okay with that because you don't like gay people? You know, like, you know, I want groceries to be as affordable as the next person, but I'm not going to kill a bunch of people just because they're brown to make it happen. And that on top of the fact that Trump's tariffs won't make things cheaper anyway. So yeah, it's just been a very frustrating time, honestly, for people who slow down and think for 2 seconds.
Yeah, and like there's so much disinformation, like especially around the culture shit, because the Mises Caucus started out by saying we're going to avoid culture wars, and that was one of the reasons some of the people I know who like got involved because they were like, finally we can focus on the economics, we can focus on ending the wars, we can focus on getting rid of the gun laws, we can focus on apparently fucking not. Because the Libertarian Party official emails were used to send out convention instructions to vote down this, like, to vote to change certain elements of the platform that made it, like, open to trans people. And they said that it's because gender ideology is part of a cultural Marxist agenda designed to subvert blah, blah, blah. And it's like, fuck you. Shut the fuck up. And like the second half of that is, oh, we found a picture of Chase with a pride flag like themed libertarian hedgehog on his shirt, and also, or porcupine, I don't know, and like a pride flag don't tread on me thing. That's such a terrible thing. We'll ignore the Trump flag with LGBT for Trump written on it, that he held up in that like well, you know, oh, mask,
I used that picture of Trump several times when Chase got the nomination because for some reason I learned how many libertarians have a problem with gay people and just were in the I guess anti-gay closet. But when Republicans would come at me with it, I'm like, oh well, here's your guy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And like, oh, he wore a mask, he's disqualified. Meanwhile, Trump said mask wearing is patriotic and every American should do it. And he tweets out him in a mask. Like he didn't.
Father of the vaccine. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah. And like he had Johnson and Johnson's CEO on his stage, and we're
yeah.
supposed to say that this guy is like, like different to Chase. Oh, and then it's like, oh, well, Chase wants to trans the kids, but Chase literally said that he like opposes surgery on minors, which
Hmm.
you know whatever, like that was an issue they threw at him. But then they're
Yeah.
like the hormones, the blah blah. um he said that he wants that to be between the doctor, the parent, and the child, and that the government should stay out of it, which seems to me to be a fucking libertarian position. He's not
Yeah.
transing the kids, but these people use trans as a verb because they don't like trans the noun. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all, and it will never be anything other than that. And like,
Yeah. Because like I'm one of those people like I don't think minors because like if you're not if the government says you're not old enough to buy cigarettes or beer, it's like why are they sending you to war and telling you what you can do medically? But it's like I think minors should be 18 or 21, whatever they decide the age is before they make those kinds of decisions, especially if they have these like super left white woman parents that want to get on Instagram and talk about how cute their trans kid is when the kid has no desire to like the other day my little girl she's 2 and she was like, am I a boy? And we're like, no, you're a girl. She's like, okay. But like how many parents out there would be like, would you like to be? And it's just weird. So the fact that when Chase was kind of like, well, I didn't say it for minors, it's just at a certain point it needs to be between doctor and it, like to me that's pretty libertarian, like.
yeah, and like the other half of it is like there's a lot of hysteria around that. There's a lot of
Yeah.
hysteria around like, oh well, it's a fad and kids are being, given hormones or getting their dick chopped off like as soon as they say anything. That's not happening. Like it happens like the hormone therapy end of it happens for many years, if it happens at all, before any surgery happens at all, and that's usually 18 plus, the vast majority. No kid is getting their dick chopped off. That isn't how it works ever.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And like so when this sort of hysteria happens, it happens because parents and non-parents of the conservative variety see this as one of the issues of them losing the sort of cultural control that they have like tried to get, historically speaking. They see it as losing ground, and also they then associate that lost ground with all of the other areas that they actually more reasonably can say that they lost ground in terms of like economic downturns and gun laws and whatever the thing is. They can say, well, once they got in charge, usually with a few hidden parentheses, like things were suddenly bad, and like that plays well with the conservative crowd because they get to pretend that they didn't have a hand in gun control or the economy or any of this other stuff. And they then like because like things like that come out and people are like, you know what, this is not what we're going to like be successful on because we have too much of a bad record in all of these other regards as well. What do we lash onto? Well, Haitian migrants are eating your pets. There doesn't need to be any proof. There never needed to be any like evidence. They just said so.
Mm.
Democrats are shooting your squirrels. Yeah, okay, they killed Peanut, and that's a travesty. They killed Fred the raccoon, and that's a travesty. You know what your president wants to do that you just voted in? He wants to give those motherfuckers immunity, bitch. So,
Hmm.
and like, so they have too few of these actual wedge issues that make them separate from the Democrats, because it's a duopoly, because the system has fueled itself. And then when it comes down to it, they have to find new boogeymen because
Hmm.
like their previous boogeymen either are being fought effectively by the Democrats or because their previous like attempts at like legislation and various things put them on the same side as the Democrats before. Like, Reagan and his like, oh, nobody needs to carry a handgun. Go fuck yourself, bitch. Um, and so, like, when it comes down to it, trans people became their boogeyman. And like it suddenly became vogue to highly simplify the issue to like boys are boys and girls are girls. Like literally running that in campaign ads, and it's like you don't understand the nuances of the issue. Most people don't, but like they ran these campaign ads and they tried to pretend as though like this issue could be simplified and distilled down to that kind of issue, and like everybody lacked the understanding that would be required. Like everybody was as like uninformed or incapable of making that decision as like a 3-year-old, including people who like had come to the conclusion based on like long years of thought and study and or like personal reflection. And instead of making the libertarian choice that these people should be able to make that choice for themselves, they have made the authoritarian choice to like let's scaremonger, use a bunch of propaganda, pretend that there's no possible way any kid could know this for themselves, and we should make the decisions for kids, for parents, and for society because this is degeneracy. And that's how you get Nazis. So maybe we shouldn't be like Nazis if we're going to be libertarians.
When people ask me what my thought is or what my thoughts are on the whole trans issue, you know what my answer is?
Mm.
We are trillions of dollars in debt. That's my answer. That's
Exactly.
what I think about.
Exactly.
Like, there's bigger fish to fry right now.
And it's like, when it comes down to it, I don't want to hear a word about genital mutilation from Republicans who defend the religious freedom to circumcise. I don't want to hear a fucking word from the Republicans who are APAC bought and killing children right now about saving the children. I don't want to hear a fucking word. But these people are totally fine with their hypocrisy. They, from a Christian perspective, since I know you are one, I'll just reference Matthew 7:4. They've got the plank in their eye, and they are examining the mote in their brother's. And they need to take the plank out of their own eye so that they can see clearly to remove the speck in their brother's. And they do not.
Well, instead of holding up Bibles for photo ops, Trump should just read one. Or
Yep.
instead of selling them to cover his court fees.
Yeah, exactly. He sells a $1,000 signed Trump Bible, and people think he's Christian.
Like, there's a whole story about Jesus flipping tables in the temple because of people doing stuff like that. Like, come on, read what's in there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as we went into, there's been some stuff that you wanted to talk about regarding the Karen situation, because like Karen tried to get these people to do their job, the libertarians in the
Yeah.
Libertarian Party, and like because she tried to put Chase on the ballot in like Colorado because she did her fucking job, like she's been ousted, and Angela McArdle is
Yeah.
riding the high horse now because ooh, I've got a seat at the table, and ooh, you don't know what I'm doing, and ooh, I'm Game of Thrones, and you're all demon possessed. Like I was in that Twitter space, it was fucking atrocious, and
That sounds like an actual quote from her. It's I would believe it if she said that.
oh, she did. She said you're all possessed
Oh,
by a demon, and it's like preventing you from like moving forward. And so now it's a routine joke. Like sometimes I've been on the Free Thought Project podcast twice recently, and like both times they've asked me to do a demon voice because like the demon possessed comment is just too good to be true, and like it's one of the ways that I sort of shut Dave Smith down when he was trying to say that well I'm stuck in the mud and I don't want progress and I just want to complain. I'm like, yeah, I get it, I'm demon possessed, and he seemed to appreciate that jab back, to be honest. But
that's what I like about Dave. Even if I don't agree with him, that comedian comes out. It's like, okay, at least he can have a little fun with it.
Yeah, like
some people.
I think maybe it might be possible to have a reasonable conversation with him, but with Angela there, when she tried to fire up about like my comments in that space, it was like fucking useless. There was nothing to be gained.
Yeah.
Like
The two demeanors, like if they both had the same thought, but the way they both delivered their thoughts were just completely different.
And so let's get into that then, because I've got probably we're gonna do like 45 more minutes. We'll go to like
Cool.
an hour and a half. Let's use some of this time to discuss briefly your opinion on the Karen Ann Harlow situation.
Yeah. So I'm going to be upfront and just tell people I don't even know everything about it. So I don't want to like run my mouth. I don't like to run my mouth if I only have part of a story. However, from what I have seen, like I have from her own words heard Angela McArdle beat her chest and say, I won, you lost, this, that, and the other. I have seen Karen Harlos, like you mentioned earlier, actually get the Libertarian Party candidate on the ballot in Colorado because it's her freaking job. And the fact that she gets ousted for just any kind of disagreement with McArdle, and then you see the letters that have been written in support by people who have observed both behaviors. It's more of I've observed both of them kind of at a distance long enough to be like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see what's going on here. And that was not an Elon Musk reference for anybody joining in. For me, it was like brief interactions I've had with Karen. It's like, okay, she's doing her job and she's got it together. She knows what she's doing. And if somebody's biggest issue is with her is that she has pink hair, well, whatever, heaven forbid, we got bigger issues than that. So to me, based on the behavior I've seen of both individuals, that was my first clue. The second thing is, as I read the details of what's come out and how many details are kept, how many meetings are behind closed doors that are supposed to be public, how many things have been, how many rules have been shifted around, goalposts keep moving on that whole situation to where it's like, I know a crooked leader when I see one. And I know it sounds really vague and not full of a lot of details, but I want to have my screen pulled up with some of the stuff I've seen and the letters that have been written, but I don't want to misquote anything by just saying it out loud off memory. And I read it tomorrow and be like, ooh, I said the wrong passage. But anyone listening, if you're not following, follow Karen Ann Harlos on X or any platform that she's on, and you'll get the story.
Yeah,
or follow Angela, watch the demeanor.
Yeah, and like that's part of the thing. Like, Angela tried to pretend that she backed Chase. But one of the ways that she says that, you bring up, like, not coming on podcasts. Angela claims that she got Chase, like, she invited Chase on so many podcasts. Like, she reached out to these podcasts and she was like, can you have Chase on? And only one replied. Well, that, to me, I know for a fact that there are so many trans-accepting podcasts that might have been willing to have him on. And there are so many, like progressive casts. There are so many casts that might have been willing to have somebody on that she didn't contact. She didn't contact all of them.
There's conservative ones that probably would have had him.
Right.
And
he was on Reason. He was on Stossel. He was on a bunch of other stuff. And he was on the Free and Equal stuff. The general gist of it is that when it comes down to putting somebody on these podcasts, if the only one that accepts you is Tim Pool, then we know exactly what kind of podcast you were trying to invite him on, and no wonder they said no, because their entire point is to try and demonize people like him. So it's intentional loading. It's bullshit. And it's the kind of thing that you do in order to intentionally jettison your chances with a candidate. And then what do you know? We find out later that the podcast that Tim Cast was running, the Culture War Cast on Tenet Media, was being funded by the literal Russian fucking government. And so this is the kind of shit that needs to stop. Is the mentality that it's okay to throw your people out and then say, well, nobody cared about them. Yeah, I'm sure nobody cared about them because you didn't want them to.
You know what my other reply is to people that said he was a weak candidate and had a bad campaign? Is this. You do it. Let's see you put a better campaign out than he did in that circumstance. It's not going to happen. He did better than a lot of people. Plus, he did win the nomination, and it's the same it's the same convention body that reelected McArdle. Granted, Secret Service locking people out from their lunch break had something to do with that. And that's been a fun one to explain to people who are out of the libertarian circle. I've got a couple of friends. I'm in a group chat with two guys, one Democrat voter, one Republican voter, and man, when I gave them the whole story on like, get a load of this, Trump wasn't even going to be there for 7 more hours, and Secret Service locked the delegation out so they could reelect McCardle. Like, tell
Mm-hmm.
me that's not crooked.
Exactly. And like, so that element happened. And then like you had the refusal to seat certain people, like, oh, we can't do the gala that we advertised, which, to be honest, great, because I don't like Jocelyn Glaybach and she would have been dancing there. Like, who wants to see Michael Rectenwald dance, really? um and then, like, oh, we can't do the debate segment either. We can't do so much because we took so long with the delegate process.
Yeah.
Maybe you wouldn't have had to do that if you weren't involved in some corrupt bullshit.
That, or hey, if you've got Trump and RFK there, maybe do your candidate nomination first and then have a forum if you can't have a debate. Get them all on a stage since the mainstream media won't. Hello.
Exactly. But no, they just wanted to give them. And this is the thing. I have a conspiracy mind. I am cynical, pessimistic asshole guy over here. And personally, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't have proof. It wouldn't surprise me if the real purpose of this was to get a campaign stop. And that was it. And Angela
Oh yeah.
knew it, and there was no debate ever. And because if you were going to do it, like, if you were going to have that level of corruption, it would not look any different.
No, and the fact that it wouldn't surprise me if RFK already knew he was going to bow out. Like, who knows when that whole thing started to go into motion? Because the fact that he and Trump were friends, because, one day Trump was calling him a radical leftist, but then the next week he's like, I really like the guy. It's like, something's up.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't surprise me if, those two and Angela were all three in the know by that point.
Yeah, and
And
Angela's
I
talking.
can't prove that.
Yeah, and Angela's talking about having been meeting with him before the convention, even. So it's
Yeah.
like, we know that something is wrong. That's all we really need to know. So it's one of those situations. I think this is a good example of when politics interferes with, like, a significant amount of people's ability and willingness to have the principles that they're supposed to have. Because, like, this was supposed to be the party of principle. Like, that's why you joined, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you joined for a party of principle. And do you feel like you got that?
I feel like it's torn in half. I feel like it's like Harvey Dent. I feel like the clean part of his face is still there, but it we've got the Two-Face running around. That's the best analogy I can make. Like, I I don't think the leadership for it's there, and if it can survive 2 more years, I think we'll still have a party of principle if new leadership's in. But I'm not convinced that the party will last through the current regime. I will say, if Trump does not pardon Ross Ulbricht, Angela absolutely should resign. Because if she says that, if she's beating her chest and saying, I got him to promise that was the condition for him coming to convention, and he doesn't do it, she has no reason to stick around. It's like, you gambled, you lost, quit saying you won,
Yeah, and
that.
to be honest, she should already do that because of
Yeah.
abrogation of duty, because of all these, like, weird little corrupt things that she's done, because
Yeah.
she's publicly supported people who were insulting her nominee, because she has, like, publicly backed a significant amount of people actively campaigning against that nominee, like supporting the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire when they said that we endorsed Trump.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, they now endorse Hezbollah. So I mean, you
Even affiliated still, I've heard both ways.
they're
Because
affiliated.
they are okay. Because I get people that send me messages like, what the heck is your party doing? And they'll send me New Hampshire, and I have to say, look, if it's from New Hampshire or maybe Oklahoma, don't loop it in with the rest of the country. Like, it's just, no. They're a little unhinged.
Well, I don't know about specifically Oklahoma. I think that might be where the Armed Bear Caucus is from. I'll have to hit him up, but the general thing that I would say is, um,
Sorry, let me cut in real quick. If it wasn't Oklahoma, I apologize to Oklahoma. There was another state that kind of had the same issue as New Hampshire, and there was talk of them being disaffiliated. I don't remember. I want to say it was Oklahoma, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, what I know is that like in terms of overall like drive, there are several states that are doing really terrible things for libertarian messaging. Like when California, Adrian Malagon said that Chase fucks kids and then lied that the account was hacked. You didn't hear about that?
I heard somebody said something. I didn't know who it was that said it, but just at that point, I was kind of like, when I would start to hear a quote like that, I just kind of like didn't want to know. But gosh, that's
Yeah, he said Chase fucks kids, and then he supported somebody else who also I believe said that that there should be things done to him over that. And like Malagon is actively involved in all of the main processes for the Libertarian Party now. He was there, like, helping with the ouster of Karen Ann Harlos as secretary and as an official for her party. He's been there every step of the way, and he had no problem directly and overtly libeling the nominee. Like, he had no problem just being a complete liar. There was zero truth in his statement. I don't know. You're frozen now. I don't know. I don't know if you heard that, but like, um,
I, am I back?
you're back in audio. We'll see if your video comes back.
Oh, okay. You're loud and clear on my end, so it's probably my internet.
Well,
Yeah.
so generally speaking, first off, Chris Bennett says it was Montana that was being similar to LPNH.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have
I
no
couldn't pull
idea.
up the chat, so I hope I'm not like ignoring anyone that's asking me anything in the chat. I didn't have it open.
Oh well, yeah. It's
Yeah.
this is the first comment, so well,
Oh,
people are
okay,
probably
great.
asleep. Um, but the
I
general
may have put them there.
no, it's not you. I normally start these streams much earlier in the day, so we normally have more traction from like the East Coast. But the East Coast, it's like 10:45 right now, so they're probably winding
Oh,
down. So,
where are you at, by the way?
oh, I'm in Washington. I'm over here in Spokane.
Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah, I do everything. Um, I do everything by Eastern time specifically because it's good for business relations. Um, but like I don't do like my own time because if start speaking in my own time and somebody's there or like at the right time for them, I don't want to be like, yeah, okay, so like I already have enough issues with occasional scheduling conflicts. Which by the way,
Yeah,
thanks for being patient with that.
no problem. Living here in Texas, when we're like in the middle of everything, it's like, especially in the music business. At one point, I had booking management team, and out of the five of them I had, four were in different time zones. So I had to try to get a team meeting together with somebody in Maryland and California, Arizona, and Pennsylvania at the same time. That was some wrangling, and needless to say, I ended up just having two different meetings because nobody could get the math figured out.
Yeah. Well, and so like let's I because there's some other sort of less heavy stuff to discuss, but I do think it's valuable to bring this up because like there's the Malagon situation. There's Andrew Chatterdon over in Michigan, who like ousted Dana Carver, who is objectively a good woman who just wants like the bylaws followed. She's had some slip ups. She's had some things that she said that she regrets saying. She came on my show to directly make that clear. But she also stands on the side of trying to make bylaws work. And so, like, I supported her. I support the Michigan 8 because Angela McArdle, for all of her, oh, you opened us up to lawsuits, she's suing the Michigan 8. And, like, the LP is, like, routinely suing people. And so they're not, concerned about being opened to lawsuits if they're opening the lawsuits. They could just do better and like try to organize with these people and act like adults who give a shit, but they don't. And so it's like this, and it's also like that with this thing regarding Karen Ann Harlos with like her ouster, where she's
Mm.
being like demonized by people like
Yeah.
Malagon and McCardle, and like just real quick, I just have to say it because I always bring this up, but it's like if you were gonna make a name for an evil person in a movie, Malagon is up there.
You know, here I it's funny. I've actually kind of started compiling some notes and working on a like a fantasy novel for the next year, maybe year after next to release. And when you're making up names that sound like they belong in like a like either Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, the moment you brought his name up, that thought popped in my head because that's been the mindset I've been in lately. So I was like, Malagon, that sounds like a character that could go in the book.
Yeah, and definitely like alter the spelling slightly, maybe like make an e at the end or some shit, so you can say, um, oh,
Well, I
sorry,
will
I got
let
it.
I'll let everyone know the country that takes that this world is centered as called Metheglin. So if you see Metheglin, it is not named after Malagon. I'll put
Yeah,
that out
yeah.
there.
Well, and it's definitely would not be Malagon himself if it was Melagane to fit in with Metheglin. Yeah, definitely not. Um, so, but like, yeah, so I got a text. I mentally distracted temporarily.
Oh,
My texts
good.
pop up on my screen. It's sometimes
Oh, wow.
distracting. Um, so, but like the general thing. So there's that. There's also the Colorado situation with Hannah Goodman and Hector Roos directly writing a support letter for libertarians for RFK. Um, and like just so many examples. So many examples. Um, one moment.
RFK is not a libertarian, but I will say this: had he been our nominee, even that would be better than selling out the LP to
There we go.
Trump and just being like a wagon for Trump's campaign. Like even that would have been better than what we ended up doing. Like
Partly, a little bit.
when I say we, I mean what Angela did.
Partly. I mean, because the thing is, maybe, but also, at least Trump is passable to listen to. Like, I mean, the Libertarian Party having the image of having sold out to Trump is bad enough, but I don't know. It might be worse if the person who's directly your nominee and who you're directly promoting in your campaign materials sounds like he can't start his car. So
And I feel bad for the guy. I mean, I forgot. I've heard what it was that caused it, and
if
it's like I feel bad for anybody that has to deal with that. But yeah, I see
yeah,
what you mean for sure.
yeah, if it's a vaccine injury, if I remember correctly.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's that's the thing. Like I don't disagree 100% everywhere with RFK, but I do disagree enough. Like
Yeah.
for instance with him, fear mongering about a vaccine that allegedly killed two babies before he knew anything about the situation. And then the babies that died turned out they died from contaminated samples and not because the vaccine itself was bad. And him
Yeah.
saying that killed like 80 people in I can't remember where right now, but I want to say Namibia, but I don't think that's true. Of like preventable MMR, kind of symptoms, and so it's like he has that, and he also has his like probable sexual assault charges. He also has his probable like he has all this stuff surrounding him that makes him a supremely let's just say bad investment in terms of libertarianism. He has his gun grabbing. He has his environmental hawking. He has where he said that the lockdowns were great because the air's never been cleaner. You know, fucking, it's atrocious. And
Well,
like
he's a Kennedy.
what?
So the rest of the family may not want to admit it, but he is a Kennedy.
Exactly. And so like that's the thing, like so many examples. And like this is what the party has hung their hat on. They've hung their hat on Vivek Ramaswamy and him being a good partner for Elon Musk. Both of those people are statists. Both of those people are affiliated with like the fucking like intelligence and military industrial complexes. Both of those people are part of the problem by any analysis that these people would normally make. And so they don't make that analysis and they make it abnormal. So
Yeah.
it's bitch shit, you know? And it's bitch shit that's going to drive us toward a fascist regime.
If a broken clock is right twice a day, don't just focus on those two times. And I feel like that's what happens a lot with like when Vivek came to the convention, so we need what did he say, a nationalist and libertarian partnership to really win this thing. I'm like, the fact that you said that means you don't know what those two words mean. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, let's have an anarchist communist alliance while we're at it. You know, like
Well, and that's the thing. We could, because there are ANCOMs, like the Bakuninites, the Mokhnovians, but those
oh yeah,
but those people like got the shaft too. It's like
yeah,
every time like a real true revolutionary or insurrectionary movement starts to gain teeth, you've got to have somebody call them spies or,
mhm,
cultural baggage or something and kick them out of whatever space you've got them in. Like Bakunin is an example of that. Marx kicked him out of the space and the Bakuninites had to go with him. So they started their own union. Like, the first international was the first international. It was like an international workingmen's union. It was supposed to be an awesome union between all these workers getting shit done. And then Marx said, "You know what, Bakunin, you're talking about like how if we start our fucking interstitial government, if we start our dictatorship of the proletariat, it'll just remain a dictatorship. That sounds like spy talk. We're not going to prove you're a spy, but we're going to say you're a spy. And now you're a spy, and you've got to, we're going to kick you out." And so he
yeah,
started the second First International and moved the Bakuninites over there, and they kept doing cool shit, but they had a lot less fervor, a lot less power, and so did the Marxists. And like Marx is an example of the kind of person Angela McArdle is, trying to purge everybody who doesn't like think exactly like her and is too revolutionary, too direct, too to the point, too willing to say things and do things that aren't like with the mainstream enough. So
mm,
you don't get the mainstream support because you're not talking about wielding political power. So the political apparatus brings down its hammer on you. And then you get, people purged. You get people like Karen out. You get people like Chase, like practically like run out on a rail. And you get
yeah.
like, the same kind of treatment that Bakuninites got, where the real rebels who actually want to get shit done and understand consistency get ousted. Angela's too much like Marx, and that's why she's losing, and too little like the anarchist communists, who would maybe had something better to do. And if anybody needs any proof that you don't need to be some left-wing, terrible, evil person to say this, just know that Elon Musk has voiced agreement with this proposition, saying that if Bakunin had been the one in charge of the First International, history would look a lot different.
Yep.
So
That's
people don't like to reference that too much, especially Marxists. Nolan Schmidt, I'm not sure if y'all know yet or not, but the JC is sided with Phillies. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah. And I just found that out. I just got the PDF. So it's good news. It's good news. Um,
what was that? I didn't. That.
the JC sided with Phillies. There was a whole big thing trying to like get rid of Phillies as well. George Phillies of Third Party
Oh,
Watch.
okay.
Um, so and we'll be wrapping soon, Nolan. But feel free to stick around for a bit. Um, well, so the thing that I wanna transition into, because I part of the thing I promised my guest here that we would talk about some of this cooler shit too. And a good transition to some of it is you are a musician and a vocalist as well, like a lyricist, and you've got this song called "Different Breed," talking about
Yeah.
how you don't like the Democrats or the Republicans, and like that sort of mentality translated into your music. So why don't you talk about? We'll sort of round this out by talking about your like start in music to begin with and where that's led you.
Cool. Yeah. And first, I got if Nolan's still on here. Nolan, were you at the Texas convention this past year? I feel like we've met, but I can't place it. I finally pulled the chat up so I can see. But yeah, so with music is one of those things where around like, well, I was always involved with music. You know, we had a piano in the house growing up, that kind of a thing. I was a band geek, and he okay. No, yeah, I was about to say I knew I'd met Nolan somewhere in Texas. Okay, um, yeah. So I ended up I was like in high school band or whatever and all this kind of stuff. Pudgy kid with asthma my freshman year. Didn't get the growth spurt and look like this till I was a sophomore. But so I was walking around the tuba for 4 years. Real chick magnet. And so I went to college. I didn't really do music the whole time we were in college, but I would pull out a piano every now and then and just like roast people with like funny songs my roommate and I would make about people that were sitting in our living room. Didn't really think much of it. After college, I realized it's like, in college, I traveled a lot with the sports teams because I was kind of like their equivalent of a yell leader. We had something called the couch crew. It was basically the hecklers. You want to talk about people getting ousted and complaints filed? The president's office had a box that was overflowing with letters from parents of the players on other teams. It was Division III football. It was like little high school stadiums, but college athletes, and the parents would get so offended that we heckled their poor baby. So I missed traveling. I missed having fun with my boys on the road, and I thought, I miss music and I miss travel. How could I get those back? Maybe becoming a musician again. And so I bought a bass guitar after reading Duff McKagan's autobiography. For anyone that doesn't know, that's the bass player from Guns N' Roses. And he talked a lot about like anxiety and depression and like just ways you can channel music and fitness to kind of like channel things like that. And I was like, okay, yeah, I need to hear this right now. And after reading his book, I'm like, I'm playing bass like Duff did. And so I picked up a bass, and that's been my instrument since. And so around like 2011, I started trying to put some bands together. It never really hit. 2015 was when I finally was like, I'm going to write some Southern rock and country songs. I was living in College Station at the time, A&M, a lot of country music down there. And I was a little before my time. The stuff I was writing kind of sounded like Co Wetzel or like Austin Meade and some of these guys that are coming around, and there wasn't really a market yet. And so I recorded some songs. I sounded like garbage. I had never really sung before because the singers kept quitting the band. I had a phobia of singing, wouldn't let anyone hear it, not even my wife. And so finally I was like, screw all of you. I'm going to the studio myself, and I'm just going to try it. And so I recorded an entire album on my own. I scrapped the band name, just put my name on it, and made a follow-up album to try to clean that one up. What I ended up doing later on is I re-recorded the vocals once I'd really kind of trained up how to sing. And so the production's a little thin, but I, enjoyed getting to put those out there as new songs. Those are now called Volume 1 and 2. And the last 2 years I put out Volumes 3 and 4, and those are a little bit more like rock and roll with a little bit of country theme to it. And so the song you mentioned, Different Breed, is the opening track on Volume 4. And that was after just some like sports arguments I think I'd had where it was like, I'm the guy that, if you're going to really get in an argument for like college football, be related to the school in some way. Like, don't be that guy that went to, San Jacinto Community College, but you act like you're a Texas Longhorn. Like, don't be that guy. Like, I went to A&M, so if you didn't go to Texas, don't be talking at me. And I'm old-fashioned. I'm that way. I had a friend that was talking about how he didn't even want to have to watch the marching band at halftime. He'd rather just watch sports scores on the Jumbotron. I'm like, you got that on your phone. Like, let people enjoy the music. And so I'm like, maybe I'm just too old-fashioned. I'm a different breed. And around that time was like when I was going to the Libertarian convention, and I'm sitting around thinking like, nobody I know gets what I'm doing right now, and they don't see the drama, they don't see just everything that goes on. So it's kind of like, you know what? I'm good being a different breed. I don't need to be like them. I'm gonna write kind of like a punk rock song about it. And I'd also been told you need to pick a genre, either country, rock, and stick with it. I'm like, I could write a techno song tomorrow if I wanted to. I'm not, but I put all that into a song and was like, here it is. Here's the way I think. And that's the opening track because it basically warns you the rest of the album's a trip just like this. So buckle up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so first off, just real quick, shout back to the previous subject, the Barimer in chat saying, and to mention to the Einkraps that Spooner was at the first international because a lot of the ANCAPs don't like to admit he was a wobbly. So yeah. And so, that's the thing, like, as somebody who likes basically all genres, I get a lot of flack sometimes for not picking a lane or picking a thing to like or something. And a lot of that stuff translates down into some of the genres that I like the most, like industrial, where it's just sometimes a clusterfuck. If you ever want to listen to an interesting thing and you haven't already, are you familiar with a band called Pigface?
No,
Okay,
it's a
so
Seinfeld episode.
it's it's a band that is intentionally fucked, and they make their music intentionally sometimes bad. Sometimes the tracks will be intentionally awful just to piss off the people who said that their music was bad. Um, and like to me, that's like the essence, the distilled. Pigface is the distilled essence of punk, put through like the edgiest filter possible. If you want to listen to an album that's interesting sometime, listen to Preaching to the Perverted by Pigface. It's a 2 disc best of compilation, and it'll possibly blow your mind. Because, like, it's so many different tracks, and you'll hear so many things that you might have heard before. Like, for instance, there's a song, like, if you listen to Pigface for any length of time, if you listen to their discography, you'll hear songs from like people like Edsel Dope from Dope. I don't know if you're familiar with that band.
Heard,
Like
but haven't listened to them.
it's a decidedly sort of city kind of sound. It's very cynical, angry, edgy. The cops are fucking me up on the sidewalk music. Um, so you'll hear that. You'll hear like Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails.
Oh yeah,
You'll hear like all these like artists who were at one point affiliated with Pigface, and you'll hear like all this music that you may have heard elsewhere. And that started as a Pigface song, some of it, and so it's like if you listen to this 2 disc collection, you'll probably get a really good impression of what this band does. And that's the reason I like industrial as a genre, because it does not care that people don't like it or think that it's out of place. It's going to do what it's going to do. Like Sister Machine Gun, for instance, is a good example. And I'm not just saying that because they did a remix of a Sonic the Hedgehog song. Um, Sister Machine Gun is an industrial group, and they made like rock music, but they also made some metal. They also made some jazz, and sometimes it's all in the same song. There's a song to listen to called Snake by Sister Machine Gun, and it starts out with like creeping drums and bass, and it's like something's about to happen, and then the drums like really start to snap into place, and you get in this like industrial rock song, you get a blaring saxophone solo as the thing that starts it out. And it's not a saxophone solo as in like Careless Whisper or Baker Street. It's not trying to be nice. It's a fuck you saxophone solo. It's so excellent. The song is fucking fantastic. And that's what I like. I like genre fucking music. I don't like genre at all. And like the music that I'm making personally now, it is decidedly not okay with a lot of people, probably, but they haven't heard it yet. Shout out to 2025 when it's gonna be there. But
well, it's funny, I'm on a podcast talking about how the drug war has failed and it's a stupid idea, and I look down and realize I'm wearing a Cottonmouth King shirt.
exactly.
Shout out D-Loc and Taxman.
Yeah. So and that brings up the question. So how political do you get in your music?
Rarely. Well, that song that you mentioned is probably the most. Because, when I'm listening to an artist I like and they go off on a political rant that I just don't agree with, I'm like, I don't want to be one of those shut up and sing type people. But in that moment, I'm like, dude, shut up and sing. Like, I just, like, when Axl Rose is telling me I need to vote Democrat, I'm like, how about play Paradise City? Like, I want to hear that, and so I try not to get too preachy at people. I'm obviously I'm preachy that way on my social media. Like, there's certain platforms are better, some aren't. Like, I'll tweet whatever I'm thinking politically. Instagram, I've tried to scale back because I know it probably drives people nuts, but I'll put something in my story. I don't usually post it as a post. Facebook, I'm hardly ever on there anyway. So it's kind of like, I actually have in my performance contract that I tell the venue I'm not going to use the stage for political purposes unless the venue has authorized it. Like, I don't want venues to think, oh, he's going to come in here. Like, I've seen his Twitter. He's going to start yelling at everybody. No, and my band members sign off saying they're not going to do that because, I don't want a guitar player pulling up a shirt and have like Trump 2024 while he's, doing the solo or something. It's like, when we're up there, you got people from all walks of life who just want to kick back, drink a little bit, and enjoy some music. So when it comes to like putting the art out there, like, yeah, I'll channel some thoughts, but when it comes to performing, I try not to like throw it at people. That said, you know, if a good enough lyric pops in my head and it's political, it's going in a song. So it's one of those I'm not going to try to or try not to. Most of the time, it's just kind of whatever
Right.
I'm in the mood for.
So it's that you're not a political band, but
No,
you aren't afraid of being that occasionally.
right, yeah.
Yeah, and that'll segue into the subject of your book, because I understand you've got one of them coming out, or is already out.
It's been out for about a month now, yeah. So it's called the Tuck Crusade, and it's wild. When I was in high school, my junior English teacher made us do a scrapbooking project where we had to scrapbook the year. And yeah, it was the best year I had of high school, but at the same time, I'm a dude. I didn't want to like scrapbook, you know, it felt weird. So what I did was after the project was over, I just wrote it out. I was like, I'm just gonna make a book out of this. And I was like, well, it's stupid to have a book about 1 year of high school. So I wrote all of high school, and I kept the draft going and kept notes all through college. So things would happen one day. I'd go back to my apartment or dorm. I'd write down what happened that day, write down some quotes, maybe what I was thinking in my head. And I kept saving that file from computer to computer all the way up into, you know, adulthood. And it got to the point where I was like, you know, I've spent over a decade working on this thing. I actually need to put it out. My friends are sick of hearing about it. I just need to do this. And plus, when you know, when money gets tight, you're willing to put more of your projects out there to sell them. So I finally, this past year, I got it wrapped up. My goal last year was like my resolution for the year was to finish the book. I finished it on New Year's Eve with about 40 minutes left till midnight. So I've reached my goal. January hit. I'm editing, I'm proofreading, making sure it's good to go, and there was just something missing. And so the book is about my time in college. I cut the high school part. It's really just college and a couple of subsequent years up until my wife and I got married. And then it cuts to the reunion of my friend group. And the reason I wrote about this, because anyone's thinking, well, everybody has, you know, friends. What's the point of a book? We went to a small private Baptist college, but we lived the college experience. I like to tell people this book is Baptist Animal House. And it's like people thought we were the worst party crowd out there when really we would have just been average students at best somewhere else. Like if we went to Texas State and San Marcos, we'd have probably been looked like prudes. But because of where we were, it was almost hilarious that we were vilified. So we have this book, and it's just all these incidents. And what I did in January when I thought something's missing, I hit up a lot of people who lived the stories that were in that book and asked them if they wanted to provide guest commentary, kind of like The Dirt by Motley Crue, where it had like they interviewed all the different people. And so what ended up happening was I have like 10 different people who are making commentary through the book. It added at least 100 pages to it, but it made it so much funnier and so much better, and it painted a better picture. So it's about a 900-page book. You can't buy it on print because it's just too big. But it's on Amazon Kindle and Patreon. And the first half, or maybe like the first third of it, is just kind of like dorky kid goes to college, tries to figure out who he is, and just a bunch of like awkwardly hilarious stories happen because of just how nerdy I was. Then I kind of grew up, and then I got so involved on the campus that there was a lot of political butting of heads. And let's just say it's almost like what we're seeing in the Libertarian Party right now with Angela happened with me at that university. And I had to change a lot of names, job titles, genders, ways to not identify who I'm talking about because I don't need a lawsuit. But what that did was it really developed me into like realizing, okay, here's how I need to approach life. Here's how I need to do things. And I kind of went off the rails. And so the tipping point of the book is about halfway through. Started actually partying like crazy. Not just like what people at the Baptist college thought. It was like, oh, this is for real. Then I met my wife, and she kind of turned me around a little bit. And the rest of the story is kind of like the turnaround and the adventures that a bunch of people had that to this day people didn't know about. There's a tradition at that university that was long-standing. It was about 20 years, and it ended up getting shut down, canceled finally. And a lot of people thought it was because of me. And what the book does, it says, actually, here's what happened behind the scenes. And it explains just a lot of different things that went on. So the book, like I said, it's called The Tuck Crusade. Shout out Kane Taylor, Nathan Berryman, Andy Archibald, Tyler Reed, Brett Myers, a lot of other people. They really brought that thing home, and I'm just eternally grateful that they were willing to be a part of that. My wife, who is very quiet and would not be on a podcast interview, she's very reserved. She took part in it. So if anyone has never heard my wife talk a lot, read the book because you finally will. And yeah, other than that, if you're into, wars between schools and streaking and all that kind of stuff, you'll enjoy the book.
Yeah, and I guess that'd be an interesting way to sort of close this out. We got like 6 more minutes. So
Cool.
we've talked a lot about the corruption in libertarian circles and how it's hard to sell that to the common person. But like, I don't think you're giving up on libertarianism.
No.
You don't see, if I understand correctly, the party in its current state as an effective vehicle for that. And that's, to me, a ripe ground for, a more agorist or anarchist approach. So I invite you to join probably further left libertarians and the whole bottom strip of the political compass in that crusade for freedom, because like it's a lot of different types of people.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like I think like a good way to sort of like bridge that, if you had a way to describe why somebody should become a libertarian, not necessarily party member, but philosophically, in spite of everything that the party has been doing, what would it be?
Short answer, read a little bit of history about any decade and ask yourself, why are we repeating the same mistakes? Longer answer would be, neither party is constitutional. Neither one is doing what it's telling you. The Democratic Party does not care about, quote, our democracy like they say they do. If they really solved poverty and wanted to help all minorities, well, then there would be no victims, so they'd have no one to vote for them. Republicans, well, same kind of thing. They always have to have a boogeyman. If Republicans stopped talking about the dangers of Democrats and had to just talk about the merits of what they've accomplished, they'd have nothing to run on either. A lot of people say, well, Trump did a lot of great things. It's like, well, you really need to dive into that, because when you've got a guy on a hot mic mocking the NRA, among many things we discussed earlier, and he's passing red flag laws, wants to give drug dealers the death penalty, it's like a drug dealer could be a high school kid that sold weed to somebody else. Like, how far is that going to go? Does it need the electric chair? Like, people really need to take a deep breath, step back, and I think the best advice I could give to summarize would be, you need to give yourself political amnesia, forget everything you've ever seen, and look at it like you're seeing it for the first time, and really ask yourself, do you really believe what you thought you always did? Because it might be a little bit different. I've done that with my politics. I've done that I went back and reread the Bible 2 years ago thinking, okay, pretend I didn't grow up in religion. Let me just read this for the first time and see what makes sense. What am I skeptical on? That kind of thing. To me, when you do that, you learn more about what you actually believe politically, religiously, anything else. And that's just the amnesty, or not amnesty, the amnesia method. Give yourself amnesia, approach it like you're fresh. And I think one thing Gary Johnson used to say in his campaign was, most people are libertarian and they just don't know it or never will. It's, you got to actually discover that. And so one thing, and to kind of circle back, you mentioned about the Libertarian Party being the vehicle that may not be as effective. I think right now it still is. I think the tank is still halfway full of gas. The problem is, I think the people with the GPS have all been tied up in the back and the wrong person was driving, and I think they've handed the keys off to another car's driver. If you can take the car back at the next pit stop, I think it will still be the right vehicle. I think a lot of people, if Angela's gone, if the Mises Caucus steps back, because I know a lot of Mises people personally who are like, this is not what we wanted to have happen. I think that there could be a lot of former people who get involved or tiptoe back in. I'm not leaving. I do want to stay involved. There have always been those thoughts of, man, if this keeps up, I'm just going to be an independent who believes libertarian ideas. But then I thought, no, if we all of us who are thinking that step out, then it's basically you have a Republican Party junior.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, no, I don't want to see that. I've already left the Republican Party. I don't want to have to leave it again. So I'm not giving up on it. I just think that it is in a very volatile patch right now that needs to be fixed before it's too late. And if it can be recovered, yeah, it's set us back probably 20 years. But I think that 20 years ago, they didn't have social media outreach the way they did. I think you can build it back faster than you could 20 years ago. And so there's hope for it. I just don't know what's going to happen.
So you're saying that you, for the Libertarian Party, you want to build back better. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Nothing makes you think something you just said when hearing that.
We got to be unburdened by what has been, you know?
That's been, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny that you corrected yourself, because amnesty and amnesia, they both come from amnestia, from Greek. So, I mean, it's the same thing, basically. Like, forget about it. Like, and instead of, you know, like, sort of being mired by the past, your suggestion is that we understand that these are problems, but that the only way to fix them is to get going, right?
Basically. And I mean, that's always kind of been a problem, the Libertarian Party. It's like, my thing is this: you'll never find two libertarians who agree fully together on everything. I'm sure you and I could probably find something that's like, well, we don't agree on that, but it's like, you and I we're approaching things the way everyone should. Let's look at some common sense, find where we agree, and let's move forward. You know, it's like, I tell people all the time, like when I had the quote about Angela that kind of blew up on Twitter, I mentioned Nick Sarwark, I mentioned, you know, Whitney Bilyeu. Whitney's great. You know, she's led the Republican Party. I mean, wow, big. I need some sleep.
It is the Republican Party now, though.
Well, she's led the Texas Libertarian Party. The reason my brain went there is she declared about a former member, "You're not going to take my party and turn it into the Republican Party of your dreams." And that quote just kind of came out there. But no, Whitney, she's been super sweet. Anytime I've met her, did a great job in Texas. Sarwark, you know, I didn't agree with a lot of stuff he said, and I didn't always agree with the way he handled people. You know, like there were some times where I'm like, dude, you're kind of being a diva about this. Like, what the heck? But at the end of the day, look how many votes we had for Gary Johnson while he was chair. You know, some you could attribute it to Johnson, you could attribute some of it to him. He still did his job. You know, like he did his job. Whitney did her job. There are differing factions of the Libertarian Party, and that's kind of the point. Like if we had libertarian leadership in the United States, all these people who are divided would still have what they need at the end of the day. And I just think that that's the fear, especially Democrats fear this for some reason. I think, well, libertarians in charge, we won't get the things we need. We won't get the things we need. And I'm like, no, you won't be handed it by, you know, to you by the government, or the government won't be there to screw up the program you think is running well. Like, it's what Spike Cohen always says. We want a lot of the same things. We just acknowledge that government's sometimes the worst way to get there.
Yeah, you know, and it's one of those things. It's why I want to have you on. It's why I wouldn't mind having Whitney on. It's why I wouldn't mind having a significant amount of people on. Because, like, you know, all these libertarians, they complain about, like, Chase not being on podcasts, allegedly, even though he was. But, like, a lot of these libertarians treat their podcasts like walled gardens, and they will not have people on. Or they're parts of these little nasty little groups that, like, you know, try to prevent people from going on certain podcasts. For instance, the Free Thought Project is an excellent organization, and they've been putting out, like, really good news for a significant period of time. Jason, Matt, Dawn, a significant amount of people over there doing good work. John Vibes, when he was doing work there. You know, and I've been following them for like a decade now. And mutuals with Jason on Facebook for like 8 years. And like these people like know me better than some people would like them to. And they had me on their show, and their comments afterward were just jack full of people who like hate me because I accurately called them out on a variety of things, claiming, you know, oh, this guy's mentally ill, which yes, but like this guy's, you know, fucking like does all this terrible stuff, and they're like, basically Jason's response was citation needed, and also, do you have an argument against what he said? And so people who want more of my stuff, there's going to be a sequel to this episode coming out. There was already the first episode, a sequel to this episode of the Free Thought Project podcast coming out this week. And the first one came out last week. So it'll be basically around 2.5 hours of content for y'all, should you choose to get it. But basically, like there are a significant amount of people who wouldn't have taken that risk. And the reason is that a lot of these people have siloed themselves off. They've built echo chambers. They won't have people like me on. When I got to speak directly to Dave Smith the other day, I made sure my shit was concise, but also very detailed, because this was possibly my only opportunity to do so. I'd like to think that's not the case. I'd like to think that maybe we could really drill down on some of these issues someday. Possibly. I don't know. But what I do know is that, like, most of the podcast sphere would rather people like me, willing to actually have these conversations with everybody, get
Yeah.
blackballed. And they're trying to blackball anyone who tries to, interfere with their shit there too. Like they're trying to run Dana out. They're trying to run Karen out. They're trying to run George Phillies out. They're trying to run me out. They've been trying to run me out for so fucking long. They banned Mises Caucus, banned me from their Facebook groups, blocked me on all their social media because I criticized Javier Milei. And so the reason I'm bringing up all of this is because if these people truly believed that, like, going on allegedly, opposition podcasts was the response and was the way to, like, prove that you were capable of, like, holding your own, they would have let a lot more people do that. But they're not willing to do that. It's a bluff, and it's so easy to call it. Because it's like, yeah, I'll go on your show. You want me? And most of them don't. And then they don't invite the vast majority of people who have an issue with them either. So I have to be that counter signal, and if anyone likes what they heard today, they can hit that sub button, because I'm going to keep doing this as long as it takes.
Actually, I have an interesting question for you, and I just thought of this. Yeah, if of the people you know in the different circles, if Angela was to be, gone, resign, whatever, who would you like to see as the chairman of that party? And if you could, if there was anyone on your radar for nominee next time, and you may have already said this on your show before, I don't know, but like who would be on your radar for those positions?
I haven't. This is an interesting question. Let me come up with an on-the-spot answer that I think would actually fully satisfy.
I don't have an answer for chair either. I was just curious.
I'm going to say this. Actually, you know what? I don't know. That would interfere with some of the stuff he's doing.
I'll go into. I think one interesting way to, like, Dave Smith will never do it because it would mean having to vote Libertarian. But if they wanted to really bring some people together, he and Spike Cohen have a mutual respect for each other. Spike is more popular among non-Mises folks. Dave's more popular among. I feel like if those two were on a ticket together to kind of. The other reason Dave wouldn't do it is, I would want Spike to be the nominee, and I don't know if Dave wants to ride second fiddle.
Well,
but
and I was thinking Spike, to be honest.
Yeah.
But like I think maybe I would certainly want Todd Hagopian back in the treasurer's seat. He was good at that. I would think maybe. And of course, I think reinstating Karen would be a good choice.
Yeah.
And Spike as the chair, and as the vice chair.
Is Spike who you were talking about when you said it would interfere with what he's doing?
No, I was thinking maybe Scott Horton would be a good chair.
Oh, yeah.
But he's doing too much. He's trying to. I mean, I'd certainly wouldn't object, but I think he would get, like, bogged down by the minutia of party politics and, like, filling out forms and shit. I don't know.
Because Spike really good work with You Are the Power. It's like, I'd hate to see that, somebody take away from that, but it's just because, like, he's doing such a good job out there.
Yeah.
I like to tell people, for being a Jew, he's doing more Christian work than a lot of us Christians are doing.
Yeah, and like, that's the thing. It's a hard thing to think of. I think Spike for chair, but it's hard to think of, like, a really strong, good vice chair.
Yeah.
Because there have been so many people recently who I might have said before had something to them, but they just obviously sold out. And so it's hard
Yeah.
for me. It's hard for me. Actually, you know what? Yeah, why not just Spike as chair and Chase as vice?
There you go. I'd be down.
Like, that'd be an interesting ticket. That'd be an interesting way to sell a new LNC. Um,
Somebody told me I should throw my hat in at some point. I'm like, I do not need. There's not enough Excedrin migraine in
eh.
the world for me to go running into that.
Yeah, fucking. That's a good way to get like David Lee Roth. You go crazy from the heat. Um. So, okay, I guess we'll sort of wind down. We'll say one parting message from you, and then I'll do a wrap up statement. One parting message from you, like where people can find you, and
Yeah.
what they should like do, like what their concrete position should be if they want to actually do positive change.
Yeah. So for the first part, if you want to find me, it's at Garrett Smith TX for the state of Texas on all social platforms. Except I'm not on Blue Sky, and I have a TikTok. I just don't know the last time I used it because I I'm not a TikTok guy. But yeah, Garrett Smith TX. That's with two R's, two T's, TX. Or just go to garrettsmithmusic.com. I've got all the links on there. And as far as making a difference and really pushing forward and being involved, if you're a libertarian, I say get involved with the party. Like, even if it's crazy right now, that's how you, even if you're not going to make the change immediately you need to, that's how you network. That's how you know that you're not alone in the state of Texas, the state of Washington, wherever you are. For me, I was kind of like, man, I am politically homeless until I went to the state convention and met lots of great people. And because of that, I was able to be a better chairman, network with other people, get resources, and just kind of really through that see what opportunities there are for activism. Community involvement's great. Like here in Bell County, there've been a lot of opportunities for us to do things. And like what we were talking about Spike Cohen a minute ago with "You Are the Power." He's reuniting families with children who have been taken wrongfully by the government from them for bogus reasons, and just hats off to him. I'm like, he's doing such good work, and he's made me aware of things I didn't know were rampantly happening, especially in Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina. I would say just network and then find your fit. And then as far as just if you're not a libertarian, do something for your community that's good. It doesn't even have to be political. Just get out there and instead of getting on X or Facebook and saying, well, this political party should be doing more of this. They need to take care of us this way. Get out and take care of somebody. That would be my advice.
Very good. Yeah, and I'll echo that sentiment, and I'll say that the Libertarian Party has been shown to be an extremely ineffective vehicle for social change and for political power. Both of those, to the point where they are now cloying for relevance by cucking to the duopoly they originally were allegedly supposed to be fighting.
Yep.
And Samuel Edward Conkin saw that all the way back in the 70s, and when his book The New Libertarian Manifesto came out in 82, it was full of a bunch of accurate accounts of what had happened to the Libertarian Party already. And this was before the paleo strategy. This was before the Portland Purge. This was back when they even still had some element of stones. And now we're seeing the full effect of all of that. The sellout to the Koch brothers, the gradual capitulation to people like David Duke and Pat Buchanan and messaging in the 90s, the correction to a more liberal stance, but only after the Portland Purge, which trimmed it from 61 to 14 platform planks. They've been gradually whittling themselves down for so long that it's so easy for them to do it, for them to justify it, for them to make that shit happen. And now we are left with a husk of an organization, a shell of its former self that is nowhere capable of actually solving any problems for anybody. So if that's you and you want to get involved and you want to do something about that, Absolutely. Be my guest. If you do see it as useless, and if you do have a thing that you've got to do, like you're like I've got to do something about this. Yes, you do. So do something. I was asked the other day. Somebody came to me and said that I know somebody who's disenfranchised with the Libertarian Party and libertarian politics in general. They say they grew up and recognized that it was an ineffective vehicle for change, and they're right. In its current state, it absolutely is. But
Yeah.
like they said that they like were disenfranchised with libertarianism, and this person asked me, well, what do I say to them? And I said, you don't say anything really. You give them an address, and both of you go there. You find a soup kitchen, you find a community garden, you find some concrete thing you can do in your community. You go there, you do that, because they can't take that from you. There will never be a full abolition of charity work, of being there for your common person, of being there as a concrete person that these people can count on, and then saying, hey, I'm an anarchist, I'm a libertarian, do you want to like hear more? More people are going to be willing to do that, hear
Yeah.
you out, if you provide them what the politicians wouldn't. Because
Yeah.
the reason they're listening to these politicians is because these politicians are making promises. But if you can not only make a promise, I will feed you, but do it at the same time as handing them a bowl of soup, it's a lot more convincing than a politician doing a bunch of jive talk on the shucking stage and like not getting anything done because of course they're liars, politicians, and thieves. So like it's one of those things. We've got to be a lot more concrete with our action and a lot less wishy-washy with our support for various things or our opposition to various things, because that's what's driving party membership down. That's what's
Yeah.
driving us into the gutter, is this lack of willingness to actually stand firm on, a bunch of issues. Now, I'm not a libertarian party. I'm an anarchist asshole chucking rocks from the sidelines. But if you want to demonstrate how you think the party could be like an effective vehicle, come on my show. I'll have you on. If you don't think so, which I don't either, do something. Start something. Get involved in something. Be something that's actually helpful, and more people are going to listen to you than you might at first believe. That's how we move forward. Because
Yeah.
if we don't get some solidarity up in this bitch, we will never smash the fucking state.
No, and one thing I'll add to that too is, and I should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about, the vehicle and who's driving is, just now I mentioned if you're not a part of the involvement, you're not a part of a party or whatever, and you want to get involved, here's how. I would also have a message for people who are currently involved with the Libertarian Party and are thinking like this just isn't worth it anymore. Ignore the tip of the iceberg, ignore the Chase Oliver thing, ignore Angela, ignore the national headlines that you see or the emails that you see about the party. Step back and look at what the Libertarian Party is doing on state and local levels. And even if somebody doesn't want to vote Libertarian, and they're still wanting to vote for one of the, Tweedledee or Tweedledum on the main ticket, if on a lower scale they want to actually kind of branch out and start doing the Libertarian thing, the mayor of Wichita, Kansas, Libertarian, like the fact that happened, the fact that you've got justice of the peaces and sheriffs and people, and sheriff doesn't even sound like a job that a libertarian would have, but we're winning those races. It's kind of like you look at the state leadership where there's a lot of healthy libertarian state parties out there. I think Texas is still one. Could we be much better off? Yeah, absolutely. But there are some pockets of the state of Texas where it's really starting to take off, and I mean, West Texas, which is super conservative. I want to say it was either the mayor or the sheriff of I think it was the mayor of Big Spring. Last election cycle was a libertarian, and he came and spoke at our convention. I mean, it's effective on a smaller level when it comes to political power. It's nationally no, but I do believe that if somebody wants to take that and run with it to make some more local change, it's something they could definitely jump in on. And so that's what I would tell people who are discouraged in the party.
Absolutely. And stay fast, because even now, the George Phillies situation, that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah.
He won his appeal, and
Mm-hmm.
like they're fucking like Angela has sent one comment to his email and says, "Gentlemen of the JC, either our attorneys or I will be in touch tomorrow afternoon." Angela McArdle. She's not happy because the guy she and her ilk tried to oust is still in, and she's trying to bar the result. She's trying to fucking fudge numbers and be corrupt. So, as usual, know that the corruption should not bar you from trying to like do what you think is the effective vehicle. And for me, my thing is I push for alternate societies. I push for like parallel economies. I push for trying to actually move things in a positive direction, physically, and not politically. But if you think you can do it politically, hey, more power to you.
Yeah.
I'm here to be sort of an informational vessel because, and as I always end the episodes, we need to, get organized. We need to get unified because if we do not get unified, if we keep pointing our barrels at each other and never upward to the top of the ivory towers, we will never smash the fucking state.
That's right.